When I realized I was the malicious female antagonist, the story had already reached its first small climax under the male-led suggestion. I drugged and attempted to harm his love interest. When he bursts in heroically to save the beauty, not only will I be sent to the police station, but the male lead will embrace the unconscious female lad and they will end up together before awakening. I loved the male lead and would do anything for him after awakening. My mind returned and I thought, whoever wants to be the evil female antagonist can be her. In the luxurious golden hotel, in the presidential suite, a faint scent lingered in the air. Ella was lying on the bed, weakly struggling. "Diana, please let me go," she pleaded softly, as the drug I had given her was making her lose her will. I remained expressionless, filled with malicious intent toward her. Just the thought of this woman's seducing my childhood friend, David, made me furious. To destroy her, I not only drugged her but also brought 3 filthy beggars, attempting to arrange a real-life show for her. Suddenly, as my hatred swelled, a book unexpectedly surged into my mind. That was when I understood why I hated Ella so much. It turned out that the world we were in was the setting of a tragic romance novel called Deep as the Sea. CO waiting for you for 7 years. The male lead was David, my childhood friend. The female lead was Ella, whom I had just captured, and I, Diana, was the evil female antagonist with an arranged marriage to the male lead. Because of my deep love for David, I had done terrible things. I had someone rape the female lead and even caused her grandmother's death in a car accident. The evil female antagonist was despised by everyone. So, in the end, my family was destroyed. My father was forced to jump from a building. My brother lost a limb in a car accident. And I, the instigator, was sent by the male lead to be disposed of in northern Myanmar. Once I realized the outcome, I was completely shaken. The male lead in this book followed a dark redemption arc, starting out with a cruel personality but later being saved by the female lead. So, according to the plot, my actions right now were part of the male lead's deliberate plan. He had complained to me, making me believe that Ella had evil intentions toward him. After I captured her, he was waiting in the next room for the heroic rescue he would burst in soon. Slap me, call the police to arrest me, and take advantage of the female lad who was being overwhelmed by the drug. In that moment, all my malice disappeared. Before awakening, I loved him and was willing to do anything for him. But now, after awakening, I no longer cared if anyone wanted to be the evil female antagonist. It would be him. After reading the entire book, I realized I had misunderstood the female lead. The current storyline hadn't yet reached the part where the female lead began to fall for the male lead. The reason the male lead liked her was because she had beaten up a scumbag who had hurt her best friend, which sparked a desire for conquest in him to win her over. The male lead used his power to oppress her. First, he had her fired, then he offered her 3 million yuan to be his mistress. After she refused, he began to admire her even more, considering her pure and unique, so he changed tactics and told me, his Fiang Qi, that Ella was seducing him. In the book, my character was depicted as madly jealous, so when the male lead told me this, I immediately staged this scene. I was finally awake and realized how foolish I had been. Thankfully, I had woken up. After awakening, I finally regained the mind I had lost for so long. Realizing that what I was doing was criminal, I immediately ordered my bodyguard to send the 3 beggars away. To prevent them from talking, I offered them 100,000 yuan each as hush money and arranged for them to stay at my villa for a few days until the matter settled down. The beggars were thrilled. 300 yuan was a fortune to them, and they agreed without hesitation. After dealing with the beggars, I walked over to Ella. She had been drugged and was beginning to uncontrollably tear at her clothes. I hurriedly pushed her. "How are you, Ella? Hang in there. I'll get you to the hospital right away." Ella looked up at me. Her face was twisted in agony from the drug. Seeing my hesitation, she struggled to force out a grateful smile. "Thank you for letting me go. I promise I won't appear in front of David again." I forced a smile. That man had already considered her as his possession. Ella, with no power or influence, could never escape him. But now that I was here, I wouldn't let him harm her. Once we got home, I would immediately break off the engagement with David. With that thought in mind, I picked Ella up in a bridal carry, instructing my bodyguards to contact the hospital and telling my subordinates downstairs to arrange a vehicle for us. Thanks to my background, I had undergone kidnapping training. My wealthy father had enrolled me in 10 martial arts classes for my safety, and I always had 18 bodyguards with me. They were known as the 18 Guardians by readers of the original book. With their help, we quickly headed for the hospital. The car sped down the road, and Ella lay limp beside me. I used ice from the hotel to cool her down, although I wasn't sure if this would help. She was burning up, and I had no choice but to try. Suddenly, my phone rang. My bodyguard handed me the phone. It was David. I sneered. Block him, and don't show me any more of his messages. At this moment, David should be frantic. Originally, he was supposed to rush in as the righteous hero, interrupting me. I, who was so eager to maintain my image in front of him, would have been terrified and would have begged for forgiveness, making excuses that I wasn't a bad person. But now, I didn't want to make excuses. I was the evil female antagonist, and of course, I was the villain. But from now on, the person I would harm would be the male lead. Taking the phone, I was about to call my wealthy father to cancel the engagement. But to my surprise, Ella's aphrodisiac kicked in. She had been panting next to me, tugging at her clothes and collapsing softly onto me. I knew the aphrodisiac called goddess tears was potent. After all, I used to be full of malice before my awakening. It as a drug powerful enough to make an elephant horny for 3 days. And I had fed it all to Ella. At that moment, my mind was distracted by the phone, and I didn't notice her gaze becoming increasingly wild. It wasn't until I was about to call my father that she suddenly pounced on me. I was caught off guard, and the phone slipped out of my hand, falling under the cushion. Then I was embraced by Ella, who held my head and planted a fiery kiss on me. Her soft lips carried a faint sweetness. My mind froze. Her face was to the extreme in front of me. As a female antagonist, I was kissed by the female lead of a bullying literature novel. By the time my brain finally processed what had happened, Ella had already started touching me intimately. She ripped my clothes, bit my neck, climbed on top of me, and demanded a kiss. I was stunned. This woman really wasn't picky. I'm a girl. And she still went for it. Fortunately, I also realized it was due to the effects of the drug, so I quickly and angrily pushed her down, fending off her advances while trying to wake her up. Ella, snap out of it. I'm Diana. She seemed to pause for a second, staring at me blankly. I breathed a sigh of relief, only to hear her say in a low voice, I know, but I feel so uncomfortable. Please help me. She kissed me again. This line was so familiar. It's what she said to David in the plot. But I'm not David. I'm Diana. The driver and the bodyguard in the front seat were already stunned. As I struggled to fend her off, I noticed their gaze and got angry. What are you looking at? All of you. Turn your heads and drive. They immediately turned their heads back in silence. I was speechless at the bottom of my heart. I had never encountered such a situation before. Theme advances by a woman in front of my subordinates. It was my first kiss. Despite being speechless, I quickly gained control of Ella, delivering a swift and decisive chop to the back of her neck. Knocking her unconscious, she slumped in my arms. Only then did I have the chance to examine the female lead of this book. With her delicate eyebrows, exquisite features, long and smooth hair, she exuded a faint scholarly aura. In the book, she is a pitiful girl with a tragic background. Her parents were killed in an accident, and her uncle took advantage of her youth to seize her inheritance, leaving her to depend on her elderly grandmother, scraping by collecting bottles since childhood. Having worked hard to get into college, she had to drop out and start working because her grandmother was diagnosed with uremia. Ever since then, she has been struggling to earn money for medical expenses while studying hard in her spare time, hoping to fulfill her dream of going to college one day. In such a difficult situation, she was targeted by the male lead, who was manipulated by me, and lost her innocence from then on. She suffered physically and mentally in a repetitive cycle of abuse with the male lead, leading to a tragic ending. The story. She is eventually killed by me in a car accident, leaving the male lead alone, guarding all the wealth I took from my family, living a lonely life. The original title of the novel is Love Deep as the Sea, Waiting for You for 7 years. Although I don't know if David will find a new love after the ending, it is truly tragic for the female lead. The author was too cruel, torturing for the sake of torturing. Fortunately, I have awakened now. And everything has not yet happened. I will protect her well once I deal with the male lead. I promise that I will ensure she to return to a normal life. Arriving at the hospital, Ella was rushed into the emergency room. I waited outside and asked my subordinates to find Ella's grandmother's phone number in the book. Ella lived with her grandmother when something happened to her tonight. Her grandmother would fall down the stairs while looking for her granddaughter and break her leg after lying unconscious in the dark hallway all night. The male lead, who had pretending to be a good person, would see this scene when he was sending the female lead home. The female lead would be heartbroken. And her hatred for me, the evil female side character, would reach its peak. The male lead would then conveniently slap himself, saying it was all his fault, and off the grandmother to the hospital. He would even beg the female lead to give him a chance to apologize, offering to pay for her grandmother's treatment. Since the female lead had no job, she had no choice but to agree, becoming beholden to the male lead gradually. She would fall for his gentle advances even though the male lead truly fell in love with her later. He couldn't marry her as promised. Instead, he had to marry me due to the author's various manipulations, and he kept breaking up and getting back together with the female lead. It could be said that my role as the evil female side character was sometimes even more prominent than that of the female lead. All the bad things were done by me, and the male lead was always forced that. That's why when I was sent to Myanmar, the whole comment section was crying for the male lead, saying that I deserved it. Oh well, in the story, I was indeed ruthless. So now preventing Ella's grandmother from going out is my responsibility. My call came just in time at this hour. Ella's grandmother was waiting at home for her to come back for dinner. I told her I was Ella's friend and was currently busy with something outside, and Ella might stay at my place tonight. The old lady, simple-minded and kind-hearted, quickly said to wait until we were done. I chatted with her for a while, reminding her not to go out tonight once she promised. I hung up the phone with peace of mind. To prevent any unforeseen events, I also sent to bodyguards to stake at her house. After confirming that nothing would go wrong tonight, I picked up my phone and dialed my father's number. I wanted to discuss the topic of breaking off the engagement with him, but to my surprise, as soon as I called, I was bombarded with a scolding from my father. It turned out that after David was blocked by me, he told my father everything I had done, leaving him worried sick. He was a billionaire, always busy like a top, attending meetings or traveling around the world every day. After my mother died giving birth to my brother, my father turned gray overnight. From then on, he buried himself in work, and throughout the year, he spent less than 5 days at home with me and my brother. As a child, I didn't understand him. I just thought he was obsessed with money. It wasn't until I was 6, when I was kidnapped along with David and we escaped from danger together, that I became infatuated with him. From that moment on, he was all I could think about in the continuation of the original story. My admiration for David twisted me more and more time and again. I danced on the edge of the lawn. My father finally realized his neglect of me over the years, so he entrusted the company to David and began to spend more time with me. However, by then, I didn't appreciate it. Instead, I believed David's sweet words and kept pestering my father to travel with me. By the time David had completely consumed the Wilson family business, it was too late. My father was forced by David to jump to his death, and my younger brother, who was still in high school, didn't survive either. Our entire family was destroyed because of David. In the book, my father asked David before he died, "Why are you doing this?" David replied, "Your parents died young, but I helped you take back the Davis family group for your father's sake. I even gave you my most beloved daughter in marriage. Where did we wrong you? Why did this to the Wilson family?" David sneered coldly, "Do you think I care about these lofty gifts you gave me? Everyone knows my parents died because of you." Dante tried to deny it. My father was shocked. "Why would you think this way? I've been friends with your father for over 10 years. I would harm him." David smirked. "Like father, like daughter. Just look at your daughter's behavior, and you'll understand what kind of person you are. Stop making excuses. Go to hell and apologize to my father." My father smiled bitterly. And in the end, he only muttered, "An unjust accusation," before he jumped. The book didn't make clear whether my father harmed the Davis family's parents, but it's true that I did many wrong things to the female protagonist. Because of this, readers didn't dwell on this detail and thought my father got what he deserved. Thankfully, none of this had happened yet. For the first time, I patiently listened to my father's nagging on the phone. He said I shouldn't be involved in illegal activities, and I promised I wouldn't do it again. He asked who knew about it, and I truthfully told him at the end. He asked if I really wanted to kill that girl. If so, he would help me handle it. I chuckled bitterly. Seems like my dad wasn't exactly a good person. I turned it around and said, "No need. David instigated me against that girl. He likes her and wanted me to create a hero saving the damsel opportunity. I've stopped now. It's fine." What? My father was furious. David and I had an engagement, and he had always been honest in front of my father when I revealed his change of heart. My father was naturally enraged. I added fuel to the fire. "It seems like he really hates me. I heard he's already contacted the police, wanting to catch me red-handed. If I hadn't run fast, you'd be going to the station to bail me out by now. Honestly, Dad, I feel like something's off with David. Does he think that Uncle Zhao's car accident was your doing?" My father's rage only increased. My doing? How could that be? The reason his parents died was that they tried to steal a major client from me. Let the dead rest in peace, and I helped his son out of kindness. If David now holds a grudge against me, doesn't that make me a fool? I was stunned. The truth was quite different. No wonder David asked about his parents' death in the book and my father kept silent. David thought my father was guilty, but my father just didn't want to ruin his parents' image in David's eyes. Once I understood that my father had no reason to feel guilty, I wasted no time exposing David's secrets. Now that David had taken back the Davis family group with my father's support, he was on the fast track to becoming a rich man's future son-in-law and highly sought after in the business world. I didn't even need to say much. As soon as I exposed David's affair behind my back, my father burst into a rage, laughing sarcastically. "Perfect. What a great son-in-law. I was blind, almost marrying my precious daughter to such a snake." The weather's cooling down. It's time for the Davis family to go bankrupt. Worried I'd be upset, my father asked me before taking action, "Daughter, are you sure you don't want David anymore?" Without hesitation, I nodded. "There are plenty of good men, Dad. I don't want you to be deceived by David." My father nodded in satisfaction before hanging up. "I'm sure David's future won't be smooth. After all, the author set my background as the daughter of the richest family. The downfall of David, I suppose. Good luck, David." After dealing with David, I glanced at the bodyguards around me with a blank expression. I hadn't avoided anyone when I spoke to my father. Several of them often tried to please David. Whispering in my ear, my gaze fell on Captain Huang. He tensed up, nervously laughing. "What's up, miss? Anything you need me to do?" I coldly replied, "I heard you have a good relationship with David. You seem to send him my schedule every time." Huang was startled and quickly begged for mercy. "I'm sorry, miss. It's young Master Zhao who asked me to do it. He said he's going to be the future son-in-law of the Wilson family. If I don't help him now, he'll make sure you fire me. You know how good you were to him in the past." I really had no choice. I have a family to support. "Enough," I interrupted him impatiently. He looked at me nervously, fearing some punishment. I hesitated but decided to give him a chance after all. I used to be deeply infatuated with David. Since I have the opportunity for a second chance, it would only be fair to give them a path for repentance as well. I said lightly but firmly, "Considering you've been working for the Wilson family for many years, I can forgive the past. However, remember that the one paying your salary is the Wilson family. If you want to change your master." I deliberately paused, and Huang immediately slapped his chest and promised, "Don't worry. I, Wang Chao, would never betray you. Not just me. Even my brothers will never do it." He then turned around and glared at the bodyguards behind him. The bodyguards, understanding, quickly followed suit and swore their loyalty. I nodded in satisfaction, and gave him a few more warnings before letting him off the hook. Huang wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and forced a laugh. Miss, you're different tonight. You seem like a completely different person than usual. Wasn't that the case? Ever since my mind returned, I also felt like I had changed. I wasn't irritable anymore, not crazy, not overly emotional, and no longer easily angered. Perhaps I had already broken free from the plot, but for some reason, I still felt very tired. An hour later, Ella was wheeled out. She had regained consciousness, and the doctor had washed her stomach. When she came out, her face was pale, and I felt guilty after the doctor gave the aftercare instructions. I asked if she wanted to go home or stay at my place for the night. After hearing that I had already called her grandmother, she didn't want to worry her, so she decided to come to my house. Fearing David might cause trouble, I had moved to a villa I don't usually stay at. She seemed a little reserved, but also exhausted. I found her a pair of pajamas and called her to take a shower. She stood at the bathroom door holding the clothes, looking like she wanted to say something but couldn't. What's wrong? I asked her. Her gaze shifted. Thank you for letting me off tonight. I was speechless. Perhaps this is what it means to be the heroine in a tragic story. The plot hurts her time and again, but she still remains content and optimistic. Even though tonight it was because of me that she had to go through this unfortunate incident, she still thanked me for stopping. I gave a wry smile. Don't mention it. This is my fault. I'll make it up to you. Go shower first, and we'll talk after. She nodded, looking like she wanted to say something, but said nothing and turned to enter the bathroom. I didn't think much of it, yawning as I went downstairs. There's more than one bathroom in the villa. Soaking in the bathtub, the hot water hit my body, and my neck ached slightly. That's when I noticed the red marks on my neck. These were from Ella's earlier actions, biting and pinching, especially around my collarbone. No wonder she had such an unusual look in her eyes when she looked at me. Clearly, she had noticed, while I, being so absent-minded, hadn't paid attention. For some reason, the scene of her kissing me flashed through my mind. She was lying on top of me, her soft lips tightly pressed against mine, her delicate body, like an octopus, rubbed against me as she whispered in my ear, asking me for help in the book. She didn't have any romantic history, so that kiss was also her first. I touched my lips, suddenly feeling like a pervert. What was I doing, thinking about a girl's kiss? I shouldn't think about it anymore. I heard that many close friends of the same gender kiss casually, so it's not a big deal. But the more I tried to convince myself to stop thinking about it, the more it lingered in my mind's eye. I sighed, realizing I would have to keep my distance from Ella in the future. Otherwise, every time I saw her, I'd be reminded of that kiss, and it would be so awkward. Actually, well, I have to admit, at every tragic story heroine has a pair of lips that make the dominant male unable to resist. I can only say, it wasn't bad. When I finished showering and came out, Ella was already waiting for me in my room. I was drying my hair when I walked over, somewhat confused. Her hair was long, the kind typical for a tragic story heroine, reaching her waist at this moment. She had wrapped it up. I had thought she would at least dry her hair before coming to find me, but I didn't expect her to be in such a hurry. She stood there, awkward, her gaze drifting towards my neck again. About tonight, she looked like she was struggling to speak. The bodyguard said it was David who arranged everything. Is that true? I furrowed my brows and answered honestly, it was my arrangement. David said you were seducing him. When I found out he was lying, that's when I stopped. Ella froze for a moment and then looked like she understood. So that's how it was, she explained. Please believe me, I never thought of seducing him. Actually, she hesitated for a moment, then softly said, he once mentioned wanting to keep me, but I didn't agree even though he later said it was a joke. I know he has a fiancée. I would never seduce such a person. Please believe me. I nodded and replied quickly, I believe you. Of course, I believed her. She was only moved by David's fake kindness later, and right now, she didn't have much affection for him. Ella hesitated, as if considering the sincerity of my belief. I shrugged. Besides you, He's already kept to college students. And one is even a married woman. Don't worry, I won't like him anymore from now on. I won't target you either. When Ella heard this, a look of disgust indeed appeared in her eyes. In truth, David hadn't been keeping women. Though he had flings, he still feared me, his fiancée, and didn't dare to be open about it. The reason he joked about keeping Ella was just a result of his desire to conquer her, considering the possibility of the male lead's halo. I decided to nip this issue in the bud before Ella got involved, to prevent him from making any moves behind the scenes. Seeing that Ella didn't speak, I went to my desk and started writing a check. After finishing, I turned and handed it to her. I heard your grandmother is seriously ill. This money is my way of apologizing for tonight, although it's not much. I hope you'll accept it. Ella paused, shaking her head. You don't have to. I didn't get hurt. I insisted. If you don't take this money, I'll worry you might go to the police. Consider it hush money, okay? She still shook her head. I won't say anything. I'm helpless. No wonder she's the protagonist of a tragedy novel. So righteous to the core. I settled for a compromise. How about I introduce you to a job? Didn't David ruin your last one? Did David ruin it? Ella was surprised. Yes. He developed a desire to conquer you, so he had someone sabotage your job to get to you. That's disgusting. As I saw Ella's expression grow increasingly disgusted, I felt quite pleased. Who am I? I'm the vicious supporting character. My job is to mess up the main couple. And being able to poison the main male character's mind with such a method made me experience the joy of being a wicked supporting character. In the end, Ella agreed she could refuse the check. But she needed a job in the book. She's a very ambitious person, even though David wanted to hide her away. She was always self-sufficient, which was why David became increasingly infatuated with her throughout her on and off relationship with David. She even self-funded her graduate studies. After David married me, she became the second male character's secretary, holding her own if it weren't for me crazily running her over with a car. She could have had a beautiful life on her own. That's why she was so popular in the book, and I was criticized so heavily. Considering her portrayal in the book, I simply introduced her to the second male character in this book. The second male character is a perfect, deeply affectionate CEO, gentle, humorous, and deeply in love with the female lead. He loves her but cannot have her. Earning countless stares although they don't know each other yet. His character will surely treat her well. This arrangement should be great. To my surprise, Ella rejected it. He sincerely said, I don't have any experience as someone's secretary. And Mr. Kiao is the CEO of Kiao Group. I may not be qualified for the job, so I think I'll pass. I frowned, then realized that Ella still hadn't been influenced by David, so forcing her into this role wouldn't make sense. After hesitating, I asked, is there anything else you'd like to do? I'll arrange it for you. Anything? Yes. Then, could I work by your side? As you said, David has set his sights on me. If I'm with you, he won't have the chance to do anything to me. Honestly, this feeling of being targeted is quite scary. He knows my home address, and I'm afraid he might do something forceful. I was surprised. It seemed that the female lead wasn't stupid after all. In the book, David had indeed forced himself on her numerous times. Cage play, shark play, and other forms of abuse. After thinking for a moment, I agreed. Then you can be my assistant. I'll pay you $7,000 a month. My dad is already handling David, and once I've dealt with him, you'll be safe. $7,000. Is that a lot? I'm afraid $7,000 is already quite low. Any bodyguard around me costs at least $20,000. I'm the daughter of the richest man. I can't lower my standards for you. Ella paused, then chuckled. All right. Thank you. Ella became my assistant. Although she was officially my assistant, she mostly just followed me around. Money was just a number to me, and I could easily pay her $100,000 a month if I weren't worried she'd refuse. I hadn't even graduated yet, and I was still in my third year at C University. Even though I now realized that the world I lived in was just a novel, I still skipped classes as usual. With nothing to do, I decided to visit the Wilson family group headquarters. I'd heard that my dad was going to deal with David today, and I couldn't miss the opportunity to observe, as it would be a disservice to my role as the vicious supporting character. When the car arrived, the entrance of the Wilson family group was crowded with reporters every time I went out. I had 18 bodyguards and 6 black luxury cars. Everyone knew I was coming. The housekeeper found a black dress for Ella, which she paired with my white dress, giving off a black and white duo vibe. As Ella held an umbrella walking beside me, the bodyguards kept the reporters at bay while they bombarded me with questions. That's when I learned that my dad had held a press conference early in the morning, announcing the cancellation of the engagement with the Davis family and ending all cooperation with them. David's parents were both dead, but his grandfather and uncles were still alive when they heard the news. His grandfather had already boarded a plane to see City, clearly wanting to clarify things in person and perhaps seek a way to salvage the situation. In front of the reporters, I directly sealed off any chance for reconciliation. Why cancel the engagement? Because David has been messing around behind my back. He's been keeping 2 university students as mistresses, and he even had an affair with my good friend's wife. A man like that. I don't want him. Even if he's thrown at me, the further he stays away from me, the better. Listen up. No one is allowed to mention David in front of me ever again. That dog of a man can go die. Since my character had always been mad and domineering, I was already used to being scolded online. I didn't care to pretend anymore and openly displayed my dissatisfaction. Just as I was thinking that my attitude today would surely land me on trending, Ella frowned and gently pulled my hand. You shouldn't speak to the media like that. They'll criticize you. Miss. Let them criticize. I don't care. Ella shook her head and looked at me pleadingly. Could I say a few words? I was surprised, not understanding what she wanted to do. But I agreed casually. Thank you. Ella thanked me, cleared her throat, and took out her phone from her bag. Standing in front of the cameras, she showed the content on her phone. Everyone, please take a look. I have evidence that David wanted to keep me as his mistress. I used to work as a waitress at a CAF. David took a liking to me and had someone sabotage my job. On the 27th of last month, he told me he wanted to keep me as his mistress. I recorded the conversation on my phone. I didn't agree, and he kept sending me insulting messages. At first, I didn't know who I had offended, but yesterday I found out it was all David's doing. Although David is very wealthy, I don't want to be his lover. Now, I'm working as Miss Diana's assistant, and I will make sure David never gets close to her again. Please expose his disgusting actions, and let the police arrest him as soon as possible. Thank you. After speaking, Ella bowed 90 degrees. I was stunned, and the reporters were snapping photos wildly. I didn't realize that Ella stayed by my side to stop David from getting close to me. It seems she didn't fully believe what I said yesterday about not liking David. She didn't reveal the recording on the spot, saying she would leave it for me to handle after brushing off the reporters. We went up to the Wilson family group building. My father was already there. He had heard about what happened downstairs and asked about Ella, who was with me. Let me see your evidence. Ella complied and handed over her phone. Sure enough, it was David's voice, though his tone was playful, almost like a joke. My father frowned, saying, "This can't be considered evidence." Ella smiled. "It's fine. I just wanted to help discredit David." Her attitude earlier could be misinterpreted by the media. I raised an eyebrow and said, "I'm not afraid." My father, however, seemed pleased. "Not bad. You're smart. All right. From now on, you'll be the 19th bodyguard for my daughter. I'll give you a salary of 30,000, so do your job well." Ella was startled and instinctively tried to refuse, but my father wasn't interested in saying more, sealing the deal with a single word. At lunch, I ate with my father at the company, and in the afternoon, I was free again. My life had always been idle, with all my thoughts focused on David. Either I was dealing with mistresses or catching his latest scandals. Now, with the villainous female character gone and no goal in life, I lazily lay in the sun, feeling bored and listless. Ella brought me a colorful ice cream and fed it to me spoon by spoon. Quickly getting the hang of it, I asked her, "Aren't you going to see your grandmother?" She smiled. I called her when she heard I got a new job with a higher salary. She wouldn't let me come back. I see. I replied. The grandmother in the book was a loving old lady who cared deeply for her granddaughterella, always reported only good news to her. So when her grandmother heard she had a job with a 30,000 salary, she must have been thrilled. I casually said, "Our bodyguards get food and accommodation. Do you want to bring your grandmother over? We have plenty of houses." Ella paused and looked at me without speaking. I was puzzled. "What's wrong?" She lowered her head and said softly, "You don't have to be so nice to me. If it's because of what happened yesterday, I've already forgiven you." I was stunned and then laughed. Indeed. The female leads in cruel novels were all so pitiful. Just a little kindness, and they were endlessly grateful. I was about to say something to ease her mind when the butler came to report that David had arrived. Ellen narrowed her eyes, and the corner of her mouth curled into a mischievous smile. "All right. I deal with Ella's situation later." Fun was here. In the fragrant garden, David entered under the butler's guidance. I moved to the pavilion, sipping tea while waiting for him. This was the first time I had seen him since learning about the plot last night. He looked just as I remembered: tall, handsome, with sharp features like a chiseled statue, dressed casually in a white shirt and dress pants, sleeves rolled up by Ella. His demeanor seemed to suggest that he knew nothing about the media storm from this morning. Calm as ever when he saw Ella behind me, he didn't even glance at her, smiling gently as he walked to my little table. "Hi, little princess." "I'm here." Little Princess was his nickname for me. I used to think it was sweet, but now it felt cold. This guy was really scheming. He was so calm even after being rejected. "I don't go by Little Princess anymore. I'm Diana, young Master Xiao." "What brings you to see me?" I replied coldly. David kept his smile. "Why so distant?" "I'm still used to you calling me Brother David." "Are you still mad about the misunderstanding last night?" "Misunderstanding?" I sneered. He laughed, seemingly self-assured, and reached for the teapot to refill my cup. Ella was quick to snatch the cup from the table. "No need to trouble young Master Xiao. I'm Miss Diana's assistant. I can handle this," Ella said, motioning for David to hand her the teapot. David raised an eyebrow, a half-smile on his face, and looked at her. "You're the one who caused trouble in front of Diana, right? Is it really necessary, Ella?" "I was just joking with you." "Is it that serious?" Ella remained calm. "The person involved didn't find it funny. And that call about you wanting to take me as a mistress wasn't a joke. Please don't appear in front of Miss Diana. She's innocent, and don't think you can deceive her." "Innocent?" I glanced at Ella when our eyes met. Her cheeks flushed, and she quickly turned her head. I didn't know where she got the idea that I was innocent. Was it because I believed David's side of the story and acted against her, or because I impulsively called off the engagement when I realized David was scheming? I wasn't sure, but my actions did seem quite naive. Seeing Ella stand up for me, David's expression darkened. "Miss Sue, if you're really upset about my previous joke, I can apologize, but Diana and I have been engaged for over 10 years. Is it really necessary for you to try to drive a wedge between us?" "Over 10 years of engagement," I repeated, laughing. "That was just a joke from my father. We broke off the engagement this morning, didn't you know?" David's gaze showed a hint of sadness. "Diana, I don't know what I did wrong. Uncle Wilson broke off the engagement with the Davis family this morning. And you even said in front of the reporters that I was keeping a university student as a mistress. Don't you think there might have been a misunderstanding?" Before I could reply, he asked, "Did something happen last night? I tried calling you, but you didn't answer. Did someone say something bad about me to you?" I couldn't help but admire him. If someone didn't know any better, they might think I was just throwing a tantrum, acting like a spoiled princess. After all, if I hadn't awakened, who would have understood the consequences of what happened yesterday? I ended up in jail, and my father personally came to bail me out. After realizing the lack of proper education in me, he began to step back and spend time with me little by little. David took over the company, my father was forced to jump off a building, and my younger brother lost a limb in a car accident. It can be said that last night was the source of all my tragedies. I stopped in time, And everything could still be reversed, but precisely because I stopped, David gained nothing. And remained the innocent childhood friend who once saved me for over 10 years. The problem is, when someone has almost ruined your life, is it so easy to forgive them? I suddenly lost interest. The scene I expected, where David would confront me, didn't happen. He is still the insecure young master of the Davis family, and in front of me, the daughter of the wealthiest man, he could only lower his head. I would have preferred if he had yelled at me for being unreasonable, so that I could have the chance to have the 18 warriors beat him up and call him an great, but this is the beginning of the story, and I have no reason to be angry with him. All right, you can go now, I'm tired. I dismissed him with the same indifference as a queen. I raised my hand and furrowed my brows impatiently. David lowered his head, looking pitiful. Diana, if you're going to let me die, at least let me die with some understanding. My temper flared, and I slammed my hand on the table, about to explode, but Ella gently cleared her throat to stop me. Miss, please don't get angry. Let me talk to young Master Zhao. Since Ella helped me handle the reporters this morning, I realized her eloquence was quite good since she was willing to speak now. I let her take over. Ella looked at David, neither servile nor arrogant, and took out the recording. I have evidence here of young Master Zhao attempting to support me. Would you like to listen to it yourself? David's expression was calm. You can play it if you want. I told you, it was just a joke. Very well. Surprisingly, Ella didn't hit play, but instead extended her hand toward David. Then could you please lend me your phone for a moment? I also want to make a joke with your grandfather about supporting me. It's just a joke. I'm sure you won't mind, right? I was stunned. And David's face instantly dark, and David, who had no love for anyone in the Davis family, still deeply respected his grandfather, who had cared for him since childhood. Now, Ella dared to make fun of old Master Zhao, and David's eyes were filled with fury. Respect your elders. Miss Sue, do you not even know the most basic manners? Respect? Ella sneered. For a rapist who tried to set me up for rape, you want me to stay calm? Young Master Zhao, are you really unaware that I know you brought the police to the neighboring room last night? A flash of panic passed over David's face. What did you say? Ella sneered. If you don't want anyone to know, don't do it in the first place. Young Master Zhao, as Miss Diana's fiancé, the hotel manager would, of course, arrange everything for you, but when the situation was exposed, do you think the manager wouldn't explain it to Miss Diana? David's expression finally changed, and I froze, confused as I looked at Ella. How did she know about this? The hotel manager had never contacted me, and I had only told my father last night, although the bodyguard was present. Ella should have been in the emergency room getting her stomach pumped at that time. David panicked, although he tried to explain that he didn't mean to hurt me. The evidence, the police and the room reservation was undeniable, and he couldn't argue his way out of it. Seeing my cold face, he finally resorted to emotional pleading. He mentioned a kidnapping from years ago, how he had protected me for 3 days and nights, his body bruised and bloodied, and how he had even stolen a pancake from a street vendor to keep me alive. These had been the darkest moments of my life, and David, the one involved, now spoke of it in detail, recounting every aspect. He begged me, saying it was a moment of folly and that he only wanted to teach me a lesson. He gently said I was being willful, making him always remain subservient in front of me. It was just a little lesson, and he knew my father would definitely bail me out. So even though he made a mistake, he shouldn't be completely condemned without a chance to make amends. Finally, with red eyes, he asked me softly, do you really want to end things with me, just because of my moment of stupidity? After all these years, you want to sever our relationship? I remained silent. The person I once loved was now so humble in his plea to say I didn't feel anything would have been a lie. I am not a robot. I'm not a character in a novel. In my world, breaking off a relationship is not something easily done. The David in the novel was still unaware that the kidnapping had been orchestrated by his own family. And in his continued self-destructive behavior, he had slowly grown cold toward me. It was my foolishness, my recklessness, that led to the situation where there was no turning back. Now that I had a chance to change, shouldn't I also give David a chance, just to be fair? Time passed, and David's expression grew heavier. Finally, with a loud thud, He knelt down in front of me. I was startled and instinctively rushed to support him. "Don't do this, David." He didn't rise but looked at me with pleading eyes. His tall frame, 1.88 meters, trembling as tears fell from his eyes. "If you really hate me to the core, I will accept any punishment, but please don't let Uncle Wilson blacklist the Davis family. Let me take responsibility for my actions." My heart softened remembering the past, when he had protected me. I relented and agreed to his request after the butler saw him off. I found myself lost in thought, questioning my own actions. Was it right or wrong? In the original story, David was dark and sinister, and I was reckless and willful. We were like a turtle and a green bean, neither of us in a position to criticize the other. So, now, giving him a second chance, was it the right thing to do? I decided to turn over a new leaf and live a better life. He lost his status as the son-in-law of the richest family, and he would never have a chance to harm my family again. I deliberately contacted the client his parents once wanted to steal and asked for clarification after learning the truth about Uncle Zhao's death. I sent the information to David. With that, David should no longer hold any grudge against my father or continue to undermine my family. After doing all this, I felt much more at ease. The days became monotonous, and I lay back in the courtyard, basking in the sun. Ella has been following me around. Wherever I go on the third day, after I brought her grandmother over, I arranged the best doctor for her. Her grandmother didn't want to trouble me, so I had the doctor come to her instead. The doctor said that her grandmother's condition is not yet in the late stage, and although it's difficult to cure, treatments like dialysis and a kidney transplant can slow the disease's progression. I gave the order, and within half a month, I found a matching kidney for her grandmother globally. Unless something unexpected happens, her grandmother should live for another 10 to 20 years. This is my atonement. In the original story, David repeatedly used her grandmother's illness to manipulate Ella. Ella had to humble herself and do any job to take care of her grandmother. Not only did she become David's bed warmer, but she also had to watch him sleep with other women and hand out condoms. I can hardly imagine how Ella fell in love with David in the story. Did the fact that David later took a few bullets for her, or caused her car accident, make up for the horrible things he did before? I'll never have the chance to ask him, because David has stopped doing those things. And now, with the intention of making amends, he comes to find me every day, trying to reconcile with me. But I rejected him. It would be better if he didn't have power. If my father thought we were back together and gave him another chance, wouldn't that just trap me? At this point, I didn't realize that many bad people don't suddenly turn evil in an instant, but rather, they have always been resentful, just hiding it well. By the time I realized this truth, I was kidnapped. It's strange. I, a young lady with 18 bodyguards and a black belt in martial arts, after attending 10 martial arts classes, could pass out after drinking a cup of milk tea. When I woke up, I was drenched with cold water. As I looked around, I saw a sinister smile on David's face that I had never seen before. His slender fingers were playing with two balls, rubbing them together with a muffled sound. I moved slightly but realized I was tied up and couldn't move. He looked down at me from above, smiling as he said, "Don't struggle, you can't escape now." I stared at him in silence. "You kidnapped me, brother David." That wasn't a question but a statement. The fact was right in front of me. But I couldn't accept it. Anyone could kidnap me, but not David. He had spent 3 long days and nights with me, cursing the kidnappers together, saying that if he had the chance, he would be my lifelong protector. In the story, Diana grew up to be crazy and reckless, and David forgot his oath. I could understand that, but I had already changed. Aside from saying a few bad things on the day I broke off the engagement, I never did anything to hurt him again. Was it really wrong for me to insult him a little when he framed me for going to the police station? When I questioned him, David laughed an arrogant, cold, and mocking laugh. He squeezed my neck, his face freezing cold. "You think breaking off our engagement is a small thing? My parents died at your father's hands, and I'm an orphan," he said. "The relatives of the Davis family are eyeing my position with your simple act of breaking off the engagement. Anyone will come to kick me when I'm down." He sneered. "It's been so many years, my little princess. Have you really only grown taller but not smarter?" I stared blankly at him, coughing, trying to speak. He loosened his grip slightly, and I struggled to speak. Your parents really weren't harmed by mine. You misunderstood him. He curled his lip in disdain. Only you believe what your dad says now. Who doesn't know your father holds all the power? He could easily bribe anyone who knew the truth back then. Diana, you used a week to ruin me. Tell me. If I killed your father's precious daughter, would he go crazy? David's tone became more frantic, and his expression grew more savage. Although I had seen his cruelty in the book, the reality was much more terrifying. I panicked seeing the murderous intent in his eyes. I couldn't help but cry and beg for mercy. Please, brother David, I won't break off the engagement. I'll let my father continue using you. Please don't kill me. Can you using you? Please don't kill me. Can you? David laughed. The more I lowered myself, the more crazy he laughed. He let go of me in disgust and wiped his hands with a tissue, as if he had touched something filthy. Why would someone like you be born into the Wilson family? If I were Wen Shijian's son, not only would I be the richest man in the country, but the richest man in the world. It was as if he had torn off all pretense and no longer tried to hide his mockery. Perhaps in his mind, I was always just a fool. I lowered my head and cried silently. He sneered. Don't worry, I'm not stupid enough to kill you with my own hands. You will die. But not at my hands. Since you've called me brother David for so many years, I'll let you live a few more hours. Goodbye, Diana. In the next life, don't provoke me again. After saying that, he turned and left without looking back. I called out to him with teary eyes, begging him to come back. But no matter how much I promised him, he didn't turn around when his figure disappeared. I sat there, stunned, as if I had already resigned myself to fate. A long while passed. It felt like a century. The sound of footsteps echoed, and a group of black-clad bodyguards dragged David, who had left so confidently, back. Ella, in a black dress, turned pale when she saw me. She rushed over to my side, pulled a blade from her shoe, and helped me untie the ropes. David, looking like a madman, screamed. Why? How did you know I was here? This can't be happening. It's impossible. I rubbed my red wrists and stepped toward him. Miss, are you all right? The leader of the bodyguards, Alan, asked worriedly. Now, the captain was no longer a Huang, it was him. I hummed and stood still in front of David. He stared at me in disbelief. Did you plan this? I calmly replied. Of course not. It was a Huang who drugged my milk tea. Ajin who kidnapped me, and it was you who threatened them. I'm just a victim. How could I possibly arrange my own kidnapping? David's face turned pale. So they never betrayed you? It was all a scheme to fool me. Sort of, I said, taking Ella's handkerchief to wipe my face. After all, a Huang is pretty dumb, but Ajin is very clever. As for me, I'm also quite foolish. I gambled on whether you'd really go so far as to harm me, and obviously, I lost. David fell silent, his eyes empty in a way I had never seen before this time. He didn't mock me. Instead, he lowered his head. Well then, kill me or maim me. It's up to you. I remained composed and ordered cold water to be brought over, splashing it back at him, just like he had done to me earlier. Seeing him soaked and shivering, I issued a few orders. Release the news. Say that David kidnapped me and extorted $1 billion from my father. Tell him to prepare the cash and deliver it to make the charges stick. We, the Wilson family, have helped the Davis family for so many years. But if they dared to be ungrateful, it's time for them to go bankrupt. As for you, David, your plan was clever. I paused, crouching down to meet his eyes. You had me brought to this abandoned warehouse, hoping the kidnappers would tear me apart, while you would, as a hero, suffer a broken leg for not saving me in time. You'd be seen as my family's benefactor. David, do you know that what you're doing now was exactly what your grandfather did back in the day? David remained silent. No matter what I said, even if I made it clear that the kidnapping was orchestrated by his grandfather, he showed no reaction. Maybe that's what it means to be smart. He was clever. He knew that once the truth came out, there would be no turning back. So instead of begging for mercy like I would, he simply accepted his fate with a calm, almost mournful expression, as if to say he was already defeated before the battle even began. I couldn't empathize with his sorrow. He thought the Wilson family oppressed him, but in reality, we just ended the engagement and reclaimed everything we had given him. His parents' deaths weren't caused by our family. But even with the evidence, he stubbornly refused to accept it. He continued to believe that my father's support was a given. And whenever my father stopped helping, he resorted to lowly tactics to get it back. How could someone like that still be the hero? I didn't understand. When I got home, my father embraced me with red eyes, repeatedly asking if David had bullied me, blaming himself for being so consumed with recall these years. He choked up, saying, "It's all my fault for being so busy. I let that brat David get away with it. Don't worry, daughter, I'll put my work aside and spend more time with you. I'll take you wherever you want to go." That line sounded familiar. The father in the story had said something similar. I never thought that, after all this time, the plot would repeat itself. But this time, I didn't agree. I patiently persuaded him to focus on his work. In the story, my father's power was taken away not just by David, but also by those long-time major shareholders who had been close friends with him for years. Business people prioritize profit. And I understood that. With this understanding, I couldn't drag my father out for a day off. When I reassured him that I meant what I said, he smiled, stroking my head. "My daughter has really grown up. When you were little, you would cry and beg me not to leave. But back then, I didn't have the heart to face you and your brother. I'm actually just a coward." I hugged him back, tears welling in my eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't understand you when I was little." He sighed and shook his head. That day, we talked for a long time. From my earliest memories to the present. We even discussed my mom, father, and I shared a tender moment. But it didn't last long. As my brother came home, a tall, second-year high school boy, he barged in, shouting, "Sis, I heard you were kidnapped by David. What's going on? Are you making trouble again?" Both my father and I turned to look. I kept a straight face. My father glared at him. My brother still thought of me as a crazy, wicked woman, so my father instinctively reached for his belt, intending to punish him. My father didn't like my brother. My mother died in childbirth, and although it wasn't my brother's fault, my father couldn't help but take out his anger on him. In the book, my father would often beat my brother, and I would watch coldly, thinking he deserved it. But this time, I stopped him. My brother probably didn't know my father was in the room. Those around us saw the opportunity to side with whoever was more powerful, so when they saw the rich being beaten, they just considered it entertainment. My relationship with my brother had always been bad. So this time I stopped my father from using force. My brother didn't seem grateful. Instead, he watched me with suspicion. My father left after I convinced him, shooting my brother one last glare before leaving. My brother stayed silent, but from that moment on, he began following me around, skipping school, and constantly asking 18 Kings of Gold about my recent activities. Oh, and with Ella now. It's the 19 Kings. Huang was sent to jail by my father. Alin became the new captain, and Ella, as the only assistant, patiently explained things to my brother. My brother muttered, half in disbelief, not caring if I heard. "Ella, are you sure it was my sister who set this up? It must have been someone else. She's not this smart." I knew he was trying to provoke me, hoping I would lose my composure, but I calmly sipped my tea, unmoved. After following me for 3 or 4 days without me saying anything, he began complaining. "Hey, sis, are you really cursed or something? You used to hang around David every day, treating him like your dad. Now you've got him locked up in the station, and you're just lying around at home sleeping all day. Don't you have anything serious to do?" This line sounded familiar. Ella had said something similar recently, but she had been much more tactful in her suggestions. My brother, however, liked to push my buttons directly. I yawned in annoyance. "It's none of your business." He shook his head, looking down at me. "You really should go to the hospital for a checkup. Who sleeps for more than 10 hours a day? Something's wrong with you." His body blocked the sunlight, and the scattered rays shone around him. Suddenly, I saw a car speeding toward him, as if it were about to hit him. Watch out, Caspian. I jumped up in shock and pushed him away. He fell to the ground, stunned. I stood there, dazed, realizing that everything I had seen was just an illusion. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Caspian glared at me. And I just stood there, realizing that I had just witnessed the moment of his car accident in the original story, so I pushed him away to save him. He should be fine now? In a daze, Caspian came over cursing and shoved me, but All-In quickly stepped in and blocked him, saying, "Young master, you can't go any further, my younger brother." Furious, muttered a few curses and turned away. I silently sat back in the lounge chair, thinking about the unusual fatigue I'd been feeling for the past 2 weeks, which had led the butler to contact a doctor for me. After an examination, everything seemed normal. The doctor couldn't find anything wrong. So he asked when the symptoms started. I thought for a moment and remembered the book from half a month ago. Yes, it started then. I had inexplicably become unusually sleepy. At first, I thought it was just laziness, but now it was getting worse, and I was sleeping at least 13 hours every day. Could it be because I changed the plot that I was suffering a backlash? I had no answer. It was something so strange that I couldn't tell anyone else. I just shook my head in silence and had the doctor leave. My sleep time kept increasing, from 13 to 14 hours, and after 2 months, I was awake for no more than 2 hours a day. A long sleep disrupted my metabolism, and my father, panicked, sent me to the hospital. Although the doctors couldn't find anything wrong, I stayed there, surviving on nutrient solutions. My father searched the world for doctors, and one after another came to check on me. But there was still no result. Then, one day, Ella spoke up. She said something shocking. "If Uncle Wilson is willing to let Miss marry me, I guarantee that after marriage, Miss will wake up." The room fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. She had deliberately asked everyone else to leave, leaving only my father, her, and the rare awake me. My father and I shared the same stunned expression. Ella, however, slowly motioned for us to stay calm, and let her finish speaking. She told us that the world we were in was a novel called Deep as the Sea. The CEO waits for me for 7 years. She was the female lead. David was the male lead, and I was the evil female character in the original story. She was supposed to die a tragic death at the end, her death serving to cement the male-led 7 years of deep affection. However, such an ending was met with backlash from the fans of the book. Times had changed, and people no longer accepted that the male-led could be a scumbag who mistreated the female-led, yet still had a fortune. The fans despised the line, "What you lost is just a life." But the male-led lost love, and the author was forced to make a change in response to the fans' protests. The author continued the story with a second part titled Back to 10 Years Ago, changing the fate of the abused female lead. Originally, knowing the full plot, Ella would have avoided David at all costs. But unfortunately, the author was attacked by crazy fans, and ended up in the hospital in the first month of writing the new book. The author, angry, wrote only an opening and then abandoned the story using a new account. So, the fans began to write fanfiction to continue the story. It was likely that the numerous fanfictions led to my character gaining self-awareness in the original plot. That night, Ella also understood everything in her sleep. Ella said, "When I realized Miss was no longer controlled by the plot, I saw her as my lifeline. I'm a normal person, and I can't accept the plot where I'm repeatedly forced to have abortions and be imprisoned, so I decided to follow Miss and protect her." At the same time, I was also afraid that Miss would return to David's side. David is the male lead in this story, with the male lead halo. The only one who can defeat him is me, the female lead. "I'm truly sorry for involving Miss and you in this." With that, Ella bowed to both me and my father. I then explained to my father what I knew about the plot. My father scratched his head, looking bewildered. "So my daughter's sleep has something to do with this?" "Yes," Ella hesitated before quietly adding, "this is the price of her awakening. Normally, any character who violates the plot will fall into a long sleep due to backlash." I don't know who told me this answer, but just like how Miss suddenly woke up, I also understood it for no reason. My father fell silent, usually so sharp. Yet at this moment, he seemed loath. Muttered, Then what do we do? Is my daughter going to lie like this for the rest of her life? I lowered my head and thought for a moment living like this wasn't necessarily bad compared to being railed by David and sent to northern Myanmar. Lying silently in bed for a lifetime seemed better. Just as I was about to comfort my father, Ella shook her head. She said seriously, "There's one way to save Miss. If you agree to let Miss marry me, she'll be able to follow the male lead's plotline." My father was stunned. "What do you mean?" Ella explained. "The original title was Deep as the Sea. The CEO waits for you for 7 years. Since the current male lead has already been sent to prison by Miss, we just need to replace the male lead in the plot." After realizing Mrs. Sleep was getting longer, I've been quietly preparing for this. As of now, it's the only way. My father, in disbelief, said, "How is that possible? How can you decide who the male lead is? This is absurd." My father didn't finish his sentence. Clearly not believing her, Ella, however, shook her head confidently and asked seriously, "Why isn't it possible? I'm the female lead. The person with the female lead is the male lead. This is simple logic. You should understand." My father was stunned. I was completely frozen. In desperation, my father forced me to marry Ella to avoid drawing attention. We chose to keep it secret. Only my father and a few staff members knew. While externally, Ella was still my assistant, of course. My younger brother knew. He found out somehow about my marriage to Ella after seeing me slowly recover. He went from being confrontational to being sharp-tongued. Every time we were alone, he would call Ella's sister-in-law affectionately and even ask her in front of me whether brother-in-law or sister-in-law was more appropriate. Ella calmly said either was fine. I was so embarrassed I wanted to turn him over to the authorities. Finally, my younger brother made a decision: call her sister-in-law on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, brother-in-law on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and sister-in-law on Sundays. "Isn't that great, Diana?" He directly called me by my full name, and I immediately sent him off to university in Africa. He snorted. Of course, he didn't follow my advice. And instead, he chose a local university, frequently traveling back and forth to help Ella with her work. Oh, I forgot to mention that my father arranged for me to intern at the company. As the daughter of the richest man, my father didn't want me to start at the bottom, so he followed Ella's suggestion and made me the assistant to the current CEO. The current CEO was my cousin, who had worked with my father for over 10 years in the original plot. This position went to David, but my cousin luckily took over. He knew he was just accompanying the heir and patiently taught me. I was impatient to listen, so I could only bear with it and grind through it. Ella, however, was serious. She would help me take notes and understand things every day over time. My cousin started to see her in a new light. She truly was a capable person, unlike me, both stupid and lazy, always slacking off. So, my little brother would watch Ella massage my head every day, grumbling and grinding his teeth, saying he wanted to be massaged too. Of course, Ella never massaged him, seeing she was my assistant and only took orders from me. I laughed wildly. And the more annoyed my brother got, the happier I felt. Life went on like this. Plain and simple. At least for me it did. I didn't do anything, just lazed around, eating and waiting for death. After a while, the truth couldn't be kept hidden anymore, and my marriage to Ella was eventually exposed after several years. Ella had originally set a 7-year timeline for us. Because the original agreement was 7 years, I had to honor the engagement for that long after this news broke. I thought I was doomed. But unexpectedly, there was a flood of comments from netizens saying, "I knew it," and their unified statements like, "I've already noticed. President Zhu looks at Miss like no one else. Who would serve someone every day after becoming vice president?" And "I thought President's bill was just being one-sided, but didn't expect they were secretly married. You guys hid it from me so well, should have said it earlier. And when did you get married? Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I didn't understand Ella was already Vice President Zhu, while I became the new CEO, but she didn't have her own office. Instead, She spent every day in mine, working while I lay in my rocking chair, watching videos and taking naps after several years of training. She calmly explained, "Don't mind what's being written online. It's all just rumors. I have the heroine halo. So no one will speak badly of us." I hesitated for a moment and asked, "Really?" She smiled and replied, "Really, the heroine is the compass of a story. If there are multiple heroines, it's a harem novel. If the heroine suffers, it's a tragic story. If the heroine is pampered, it's a sweet story. If the male lead focuses on making money, it's a no heroine story. I'm the heroine. So now that we're married, our story is a Yuri novel." I was speechless, at a loss for words. She continued explaining, "In Yuri novels, the public supports the relationship, so it won't be long before. If you don't want a divorce, the country will revise the law to support same-sex marriage." I froze, holding my chips near my lips. But strangely enough, what Ella said really came true. At the press conference, Ella sincerely apologized, saying she had been secretly in love with me for years ago. When I fell ill and entered a strange, unexplained sleep, doctors around the world were helpless at that time. A passing Taoist said that I had a connection with Ella, and if we married, I would have a chance to recover normally. No one would believe such things, but seeing that I woke up for no more than half an hour a day, my dad had no choice but to try anything. However, such things would only be ridiculed by the world, so we had to marry in secret. Now that the truth was exposed, we could only be honest and hoped people wouldn't mock us. Because the Taoist said that after 7 years of marriage, I would be fine. So after that, we would divorce. Everything was for the sake of my recovery. The internet exploded. Oh my God, what kind of fairy tale love is this? I never believed in gods before, but now I do. I love this. Why doesn't the country allow same-sex marriage? Please pass the same-sex marriage law. Crying. They said they'll divorce after 7 years. Don't do it. My Diana and LSCP, I won't let you divorce. The media dug up the story of my inexplicable slumber for years ago at that time. Global consultations failed to identify the cause. Many mystics came forward to ride the wave of popularity, promoting the idea that true love was invincible. As for me, the person involved, my feelings could only be summarized as ease. How? 3 years later, we still hadn't divorced. The country really passed the same-sex marriage law, and after us, more and more same-sex couples appeared. My younger brother would post short videos of me and Ella online, and everyone would criticize how I could be so idle, and how Ella could pamper me so much. Not long after our secret marriage was exposed, Ella confessed her feelings to me. She said, "Thank you for letting me go that night. If you hadn't stopped, it would have been a nightmare for me. I fell in love with your kiss, just once. But it's forever engraved in my dreams." She said, "Thank you for saving my grandmother. The slightest favor deserves my lifelong devotion." I was confused for a whole night. And somehow, in my dazed state, we ended up together. Maybe I had been assimilated by this Yuri world. Or maybe it was her gentleness that melted me, or perhaps it was her years of spoiling me that made me gradually lose my heart. We were together. In the 7th year, we held a grand wedding. The future is long, and the story of President Zhu and his beautiful wife continues. Extra chapter, Diana's post-marriage diary. September 12th. Cloudy. The weather is bad today, just like my mood. It's been 8 years since I married Ella. And the day after tomorrow is my birthday, September 15th. But this idiot Ella doesn't seem to have any intention of coming back. She is still in Europe for business. Did she forget my birthday? Last year, she went with me to Disneyland, and the year before that, we went to Happy Valley together. But this year, I haven't heard a word from her. MDH. Women, this is what they call the 7-year itch. I've been angry at home for a week, and I can't take it anymore. So I just bought a plane ticket to Europe to go and scold her. I was so tired on the flight that I could barely keep my eyes open when I finally got off the plane. My assistant, Arlen, suddenly pointed ahead and said, "Madam, Mr. Zhu is here to pick you up." I snapped awake. I flapped his head. I've told you to call me president when outside. And call her madam. Arlen grinned and said, got it. We walked to Ella. The weather in Europe in September is different from home. Chilly with a gust of wind. Ella took my hand and blew on it, smiling. Why did you suddenly come to find me? Miss me, NKH. I didn't. I turned my head away. Fuming. Arlen, that's Chulfont. Immediately explained. Mr. Zhu, it's someone's birthday in 3 days. You forgot. And now someone's mad. I kicked him in the leg. What do you know? He laughed and dodged, almost causing me to twist my ankle. Ella hurriedly caught me, smiling. All right, don't hurt yourself. She held my hand and looked at me with a smile. Her direct and gentle gaze made me flustered, and I turned my head away in embarrassment. I knew I was just throwing a tantrum. And I also knew she was busy with serious business here, but I missed her so much that I used my temper as an excuse to see her after being married for so long. This was the first time we had been apart for more than a month. After being apart, I truly understood what it means to miss someone. I'm sure Ella understood my feelings, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she asked in surprise, someone's birthday in 3 days, who's that? I don't remember. I froze. Was she kidding me? Although I knew she was teasing. I was still upset. I grumbled, fine, if you don't remember. I'm leaving, and I turned to walk away, but Ella was quick. She grabbed me from behind. And I couldn't break free. I glared at her. Let go, or I'll call the police. Ella smiled and said gently, answer me one question, and I'll let you go. Oh? What question? I got curious and asked her to go ahead. She seemed to think hard and then whispered in my ear, smiling. Someone once said they hadn't been to Europe before and wanted to celebrate their birthday here. But I waited for her hair. After 3 months, she still didn't come. Azo, do you know who that person was? I froze. This happened? I vaguely remembered mentioning last year that I wanted to go to Europe for my birthday the following year, but I had said it casually. A whole year had passed. Who remembers? But Ella remembered. Darlin remembered. No wonder they just watched me sulk at home for a week without saying anything. Waiting to see me make a fool of myself. So annoying. My face turned hot, and the heat spread up to my ears. March 17th. Cloudy. I like to write in my diary when the weather's bad, because my mood is just as bad as the weather. Ella cheated on me. I saw photos on my phone of her going to a hotel with another woman. She dared to cheat on me and going to castrate her, but when I sat down and thought about it, could I have misunderstood her? After all, we've been married for 10 years. And she's always been loyal as the female lad. Many men and women pursue her, but she's always worn our wedding ring and said her heart only belongs to me. MBH. She knows how precious I am. When she comes back, I'm going to make her kneel on a washboard to apologize. Let's see if she dares go to a hotel with another woman again. If she wants to go to a hotel, she can come to me. March 19th. Sunny. Embarrassing. Ella found my diary in 10 years of marriage. I've written 1,000 diaries, and 5 out of 10 have mentioned her, but she wasn't surprised at all. Instead, she seriously told me, Azo, next time, hide your diary in a different place. It's hard not to find it when you always leave it under your pillow. I was embarrassed, but I'd taken extra precautions. It was hidden under the pillow and the bed sheets. Trying to cover up my awkwardness, I asked her if she had been snooping. She shook her head and said that, at first, out of curiosity, she had flipped through a couple of entries. When she realized it was a diary, she stopped. She's a person of integrity and believes it's immoral to sneak a peek at someone's diary, so every time I wrote and fell asleep on the desk, she would carry me back to bed and secretly tuck the diary back in. So embarrassing, my toes were practically digging holes in the floor. At least she didn't steal any more glances otherwise. She would have discovered that since she confessed her love, every single entry was about her. April 1st. Cloudy. Today is April Fool's Day. The young master of the Sun family is holding an April Fool's Day party at his villa on the outskirts. I excitedly went, and Ella turned down an invitation from MRLI to accompany me. The party was fun, with young people laughing and playing, but suddenly it turned to me. Someone jokingly said, last time I saw Mr. Zhu and Miss Lee going to a hotel together. Maybe she's cheating? Just kidding. The whole place went silent. What kind of joke is that? I stood up, ready to get angry before we got married. My dad spoiled me, and after we married, Ella pampered me. If I got mad, I would make sure they paid for it, but Ella was faster than me. Always gentle, with a smile in her speech. She suddenly froze and got up, throwing a glass of cold wine in the man's face. That joke wasn't funny, please apologize. Her sharp attitude made me suddenly remember that Ella, too, could be fierce. I had always seen her smile at me, but now, I saw a bit of my dad's temperament in her. The man turned pale, stumbling to apologize. Ella forgave him, but explained to everyone, especially to me, that hotel is owned by the Lee family, and we've been discussing business there. I went with Miss Lee to inspect the premises. Mrj Yin, please don't make jokes that others don't find funny. I only have my wife in my heart. Next time, be careful with your words. She remained gentle and polite, just as she had for 10 years. Mrj Yin was embarrassed, and from then on, didn't dare say another word the rest of the evening. On the way home, we sat in the back seat, with Ella resting her head on my lap. She had drunk a bit and was in a bad mood tonight. I remembered the diary entry from last month when I scolded her, and I felt uneasy inside, so I gently patted her head, trying to soothe her drunken state. Azu, I'm so tired, she suddenly spoke, quietly complaining to me. I was stunned for a moment and quickly asked, is it work? Don't overwork yourself. I've told you before. I can handle it. No, she interrupted, sighing. It's always someone wanting to chase after me, even though I've told everyone I only have feelings for you. They don't believe me. I froze for a second. What could I say to that? I could only awkwardly reply, because you're the female lead. An outstanding female lead attracts the attention of many, including the male lead, second male lead, and third male lead. Now that the world has become a Yuri world, even the former female supporting characters have found their place over the years. My father once said with great enthusiasm, after little Zhu came into our lives, I will become the world's richest man in my lifetime. Take good care of her. I'm entrusting you with my most precious daughter. If my father hadn't spoiled me since I was little, I would have thought he was selling me off. But of course, someone took advantage of the situation and acted coy. I poked her on the head. All right. This is a fortune that others can't even beg for. If it's work, I can help you. But if it's love problems, I can't help. She smiled, took my hand, and kissed the back of it. I wouldn't want that. Never mind. As long as you trust me, Ella, will love only you in this life. Shameless, she always says romantic things at the most inappropriate times. Even though we're like an old married couple now. So annoying. February 14, sunny. Today is Valentine's Day. As well as our 15th wedding anniversary. Ella had a sudden idea and said she wanted to spend the holiday in Antarctica. In the past, it was always her accompanying me. So this year I decided to accompany her to Antarctica. Castian heard about it and insisted on coming along. I couldn't refuse him, so I reluctantly allowed this third wheel to join us. Antarctica is freezing cold, over 20 degrees below zero, with water freezing into ice. Unfortunately, on the first day there, I caught a cold from the wind due to my excitement. Elias' eyes were red, and while I was coughing and telling her not to get too close so she wouldn't catch it, she shook her head, saying she regretted coming. That night, I curiously asked why she suddenly wanted to come to Antarctica. She hesitated for a moment and made up an excuse, but I could tell she had something on her mind, so I pressed her, and she finally stopped hiding the truth. It turned out her parents had once been members of an Antarctic research team. They had come here for research and never returned. I was shocked. The original story did mention that the female lead's parents had passed away, but I hadn't paid attention to the details. To learn they had died this way filled me with a deep sense of guilt. Over the years, Ella has been so kind and thoughtful to me that I had almost forgotten she was once a poor girl who couldn't afford food or warm clothes. No wonder she wanted to come to Antarctica after her grandmother passed away. Last year it turned out that she had no family left in this world, so she came to see this place. She sank into her thoughts. Her expression pained. I know this world we're in is virtual, and my parents' death is just part of the storyline. But in my memory, I'll always remember how they looked when they left home when I was 6. They hugged me, kissed me, and said they were going to a faraway place, asking me to wait for their return. But they never came back. Then many years passed, and when Grandma passed away, they still hadn't returned. Azu, after this, I'll be an orphan. I have nothing left, only you. That night, Ella shared a lot with me. Maybe because my illness had triggered her emotions, or maybe it was the cold of Antarctica. She was as fragile as a child, pouring out her grievances to me. I had 1,000 things I could say to comfort her, but I gave up and gently kissed her, deepening the kiss. After being married for more than a decade, Ella is still as addicted to my kisses as she was when she first confessed. Every time I kiss her, she forgets everything. I pulled her hand and placed it on my chest. Ella, what is this? Light. Light? It's my heart. I bit her playfully, and she smiled softly, letting me tease her. I whispered, whether our world is real or not, the fact that I'm here with you is beyond question if you don't believe it. Feel it, my heart beats for you. She looked up at me. Is it really beating for me? What else would it beat for? I asked in return. Ella hesitated for a moment, and then laughed softly. I thought it was the work of nature's craftsmanship on humans. I'm talking about feelings. And you're bringing up ancient evolution? Annoyed. I tried to get up, but Ella reversed the situation, pinning me down. As I struggled, Ella pressed my shoulders down, laughing gently. Shh, don't be so loud. You'll wake everyone up. I glared at her and coughed. Her face showed concern as she pulled over a blanket and tucked us both in. You can't go out, you'll catch my cold. Don't worry, Azu's heart beats for me. We'll both get sick together. You're annoying. My wife. Kiss me. Wife, will you always stay with me? Depends on your behavior. How should I behave? Like this? Wait, don't touch there. Aha. Antarctica may be cold, but our two hearts, embracing each other, are warm. Under the starry sky, true love is timeless. Silly Ella, I will love you forever, always.